So, values are really interesting because many people say they know what their values are, although there are so many different kinds of values out there that is beyond the normal top four, which most people will say is honesty and loyalty and trustworthiness, right? Those are just the basic top values, and our values go beyond so much more that, like your spirituality. How do you want to experience your spirituality? What is important to you around that, and how you get to live that? So, when you start thinking about all these different life areas and all sorts of different values, the reason why these are so important is because it becomes your own internal compass, okay? Your own moral compass. And it's interesting because many people have a different moral compass, right? Of course, we all know the basics, right from wrong, and how to treat people, but there are many different life areas in which it might look so different to so many people, relationships being one of them. So, what do you truly value in a relationship? And it took me so many crazy scenarios for me to really know what I value. It was all trial and error for me. So I'm going to share some of my stories with you. And this is why I share my stories, so that you can learn through my experience and not have to go through what I went through. This is why I talk about boundaries. This is why I talk about self boundaries. When we think of boundaries, we often just think how we say them to other people and not how we keep them to ourselves. So for me, one of my biggest values is my sovereignty. One of my other biggest values is being able to choose for me when it comes to my health, what I have capacity for and what I don't have capacity for. So, about 4 years ago, I was in this situation with someone that I had trusted, and I was going through a major pain flare up. I was having issues with my nervous system at the time. They thought I had MS. So I was actually being treated, for that, and going through MRIs and all this barrage of testing. I had to fly back and forth between Alberta and BC in order to get treatment because there just wasn't any specialists on the island that I could see. It was like a few-year wait, and I couldn't even get in for an MRI. So I had to go to Calgary a lot. So the interesting thing was I was in a huge flare and I was in a lot of pain physically. My nervous system was just shot and haywire. There was a lot of things that were going on in my life at that point, and I was really coming back to really learning who I was, because I just went through like this whole breakdown and crumbling in my life. So I had told the person that I was with that, I couldn't have any sort of intimacy because of this pain, because of this flare. And it was a couple of days of saying, like, hey, like, I don't know if this is going to last a week or two or a month. When you have like a fibro flare and nervous system dysregulation, you don't know how long that is going to last. It could be a couple days, it could be a couple months. You don't know. My longest flare lasted, I think, for 4 months at least. And it was just brutal. So, getting into this relationship, he knew this about me. He knew these issues that I was having, and he said it was okay, and usually very supportive as long as I was giving him everything that he needed, whether that meant I was self-abandoning or not, it didn't matter. And I didn't recognize it at the time. So when I finally said, like, look, I cannot be intimate because I'm in so much pain. My nervous system is so all over the place. Like, I'm dizzy, I'm nauseous, I'm in pain. Like, I can't really do much. I couldn't even go out for my normal nature walks, like how I would normally do, like 2 hours a day. I couldn't even go out for 10 minutes at this time. And the thing that happened was, instead of being supportive, he got upset. He got anxious. He started slamming doors and going to the other room, sleeping in a separate bedroom, and just being very volatile around it and bringing up all of his past wounds. Even though I reassured him a million times around that it's just this physical stuff going on, it has nothing to do for my level of care or anything for you. It has nothing to do with that. And of course, he started saying that I was withholding and just a whole bunch of things that were not true. And I just said, look, like, this is my physical health. And it got to the point where a few days of this was happening. He wasn't sleeping at all. He was up all night long, keeping me awake so I couldn't sleep and I couldn't get better. And I even said, like, I know you're feeling this way. I know you're feeling anxious. Maybe you should see your therapist. I was like, I need to sleep in order to get better. I need to have a minimum of 8 to 10 hours in order to function somewhat normally throughout the day. And I was like, I understand that you're anxious, but there's nothing I can do. I've reassured you. I don't know what else that you need from me. And it got to the point where he just kept pressuring me for intimacy to where I finally caved. And in that instant, when it was happening, I felt my soul leave my body. And I knew I abandoned myself and gave into something that I really didn't want. It was really actually a no. I was just stiff and still. And it was really difficult for me because then I went to a whole PTSD flashback as well, because I had been through abuse in the past and it brought up a lot of my own wounding. And I know that this situation, if he saw it this way, could be a gift for him to one, work through his insecurities, but two, is a gift for me to work through my past experiences and to also know where I was abandoning myself and where I wasn't being strong enough. But in this situation, I completely like disassociated. I went into like this PTSD spiral. Like I got up and I actually left. I packed everything and I left. And he kept calling and calling and calling and calling, even though I told him, I was like, I need at least like 2 to 3 days away. Like I cannot see your name. I can't speak to you. I need time to book in with my own therapist and to figure out why my body is responding this way. Because at the time I didn't know. I did not have that reflective self-awareness capability to realize I just abandoned myself and gave into something that I really didn't want. And then he started calling me a narcissist. He started calling me an abuser. He said that this was abuse, that I was stonewalling. And I told him, I was like, I am literally in this fibro flare and I was just so dysregulated, and I don't even know, like I wasn't even able to respond in like this cool, calm, collected way. All I was able to say is I'm in this pain spiral. I'm in this weird flashback mode. I don't know why, but all I know is every time I see your name and every time I think about you, I feel sick. So I need to see my therapist. I need to figure this out for me. And he just wouldn't let me. He said, no, we need to talk about it right now. You can't have that time. And I said, I need that time to talk to my therapist. I need that time to figure this out. And once I do, then we can sit down and talk. But he just wasn't having it. And he kept calling and calling and calling and calling and calling to the point where I said, I can't do this. I literally cannot be with you. Like he forced me to make that choice. And he said, if you can't answer my call, then you need to figure out if you even want to be with me or not. And I said, okay, then no. If you cannot give me that time to figure this out, then no, we are done. And I literally had to like break up with him throughout this flare and all these things that were happening. And it was really, really painful for me because I didn't know what the heck was going on. And then he was calling me all these names and being really angry and anxious towards me. So I understand anxiety because I've had it my whole life too. And I don't want to ever diminish or dismiss people with anxiety, but you also cannot put that on another person either. You have to actually deal with it. And this is where a lot of talk therapy can not do a lot of good, because he was seeing a therapist and they were telling him that he was so self-aware and so good at everything that they couldn't possibly help him. I don't know if they actually said that, but that's just what he told me. So coming to think of it, if that was the case, then they're really doing a huge disservice. And he still had all this crazy anxiety all the time. And I know a part of it for me was a little bit of avoidance because of my pain levels that I was in. And I was in a lot of pain levels because it was probably out of alignment for me to even be there. It was a decision that I knew I had to make eventually. And I knew that this wasn't right for me on some capacity because it was a lot of people pleasing. And there was a lot of just pressure on my end to perform in a lot of ways. And there was just a lot of things that were out of my value system that I didn't recognize until after. Things that like really gave me, the ick a lot of the time, and things that had I had my time back, I actually would have stood up for a lot more had I known. But now that I do, and this is why I'm adding this into my client sessions. This is why I'm doing this through the Self Love Academy, is really acknowledging your values in all ways so that you can actually stand strong in them. Because in this case, I had to learn the hard way in order to learn my values. And I don't want you guys to have to go through coercion in order to understand what your values are. And mine was very basic, like support with health. That's a huge value, being supportive with the other person's health. And I didn't know that. And it took me going to my therapist to actually realize that that whole scenario was coercion, and coercion is not consent. And that just like blew my mind because I didn't realize. I'm like, but I didn't say no. But I was pressured for quite some time, for days and days and days, and seeing all of this chaos happen around me. So I gave in order to minimize that outside of me. So I literally abandoned myself in order to create a sense of safety. But in turn, I actually disassociated and reignited all my past issues that I hadn't let go of. And it was being triggered by this because I was responding in an old pattern, and my body was like, nope, nope, this is an old pattern. We're not doing it anymore. And it really just like showed me that this is not going to happen again. So I had to get out of that situation, and I had to see the truth of that person in order to move forward from it. And it was really traumatizing. I'd spent months and months with my therapist after that because it was really bringing up these old belief systems that the only value that I had as a woman was my body. The only value I had for a man was how intimate we were. The only value I had was making sure that he was happy, and my happiness and my health didn't matter. So it brought up a lot of things that I really had to work on and work through in order to be in another relationship, in order to be with someone who really loved and supported me. And it was interesting because once I got really clear, it wasn't very long later that I was actually able to have a relationship with someone who, if I'm saying I'm sick, oh my gosh, he will cuddle me. He will make me dinner. He won't pressure me into anything. And he just lets me heal and get better. And there's never any pressure ever around intimacy. He gets it and he doesn't take it personally. He doesn't take it as an attack. He doesn't take it as I don't love him, and it's really reassuring for me that I'm allowed to say no in this relationship, and he honors it. And I know for myself, if I was ever in a relationship again where my no wasn't honored and there was a lot of like coercion and manipulation and things like that, that I would see it for what it is. And I would say, no, I'm not doing this. So it was a good learning experience, and why values are so important, because then you have a conscience. You are aware of what's going on. And on the other side, his value might have been intimacy, right? There might have been other stuff going on, like maybe I was more avoidant because of all my health issues. So for him, that was his way of feeling connected. But for me, I was feeling used. So you can see that weird dynamic start to play out. And based on his wounding, even though intimacy is important, intimacy goes so much beyond the physical, right? And if he had trust in me, trust in the feminine, then he would have trusted what I had said. Because of his past wounding and his past experience, he thought I was doing the same thing that his ex was doing when I was not. So that's why it's so important, men and women, to work on your wounding, because otherwise it's going to spill over onto other people that are not doing what you think they are, because your wounds are still so active in your subconscious. And this is why values are so, so important, because when your values are important, you have a sense of self, you have a sense of trust, you have so much of a conscious and an internal compass that these things you can see the truth of as they're happening. So this is why it's so important, because with values, you have boundaries, you have follow through, and you won't get caught up in these weird energetic spirals of trauma bonding. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But I hope that even just hearing about this is really helpful for you. And so you can understand on where you might be fawning on your own decisions, where you might be people pleasing and giving up parts of yourself that you actually don't want to give up or even feel good about, but it's being that good girl or good boy or whatever the case may be, where you might be that people pleaser, right? So this is around recognizing, setting your values and boundaries, and coming back to a sense of self. So I hope this is helpful for you guys. And of course, if you have questions, leave comments, or email me at trinitysage333 at gmail.com, or you can find me on my socials.